Hey everyone, it's Baden from Skillest once again, and today we are very lucky to have Mr. Steve Guiliano. So Steve's he's originally an Australian, but he's coaching all over Asia. Really, I suppose you'd say, isn't that right, Steve?
Yep, still, that's right. Yeah, based out of Malaysia, but do spend a lot of time traveling throughout Southeast Asia.
A ridiculous amount of time traveling, really, don't you? Do you want talk us through what's your last 2 weeks or something, and how much traveling, and really
Uh,
how your weeks look, and who you teach, and what you do.
yeah, well, the last, if you include the next 2 weeks, that would be 10 weekends out of Malaysia
Yeah,
in a row.
yeah,
So that included a weekend, kind of week teaching in Bangkok or Thailand, um, like 10, 12 days out of India,
mm,
Singapore, Indonesia. I do about 4 trips to India per year, and last weekend was Indonesia, and then next weekend I've got 2 weekends in Thailand again. A little bit for the tournament, Asian tour event. Got a couple of guys playing in that, and then it normally leaves me kind of back a few days coaching, some regular students at fly-ins and things like that. So
mm.
my day-to-day in Malaysia is pretty busy. Sort of generally a Tuesday to Saturday if I'm here, and that tends to be sort of 8 till 5 coaching. So I try and do 8 hours a day, and then my travel is pretty full on with golf schools and privates and things like that. So
It's amazing. So,
yeah,
and in that, you do teach people that range from, people that are just trying to get better from the handicap of around about 18 all the way through to touring professionals. Is that right?
yeah. So my mix would be probably 50% would be sort of avid golfers. I call them kind of very keen avid golfers, good level club golfers, anywhere from 20 handicap down into kind of good single figures,
Yep.
and guys and some ladies who are just have some time
Mm,
and are pretty dedicated to getting better, which is a nice,
mm,
it's a nice student to have.
mm.
And then the other probably 50% would be elite. I call them elite amateurs, which would be in the sort of 13 to 18-year-old looking to go to college, competitive amateurs playing their kind of local amateur scene and some international.
Yep.
It's probably a good sort of 30% or more, and the rest would be professionals,
Mm,
local pros here in Malaysia, ADT, Asian Development Tour, and a couple of guys in the Asian Tour as well.
mm. And you also spend a bit of
Yeah.
time teaching other coaches, don't you, as well? You spend some time with some other coaches in Singapore and stuff like that, helping coach the coach.
Yeah, not too much. That was more for aim point, but I do get coaches kind of flying in and hanging out, but nothing that's sort of too organised. Is it like they'll just come and sort of shadow me in that sense?
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I do try and run 1 or 2 seminars a year in Asia,
Yeah.
and that's kind of bringing in other coaches from the US or other specialist coaches in the area, and sort of holding seminars over like 2 days. Yeah, much like what you get in the US, I guess.
And there's so much information out there now in terms of coaching styles and just information. Like who do
Mm.
you think have been your biggest influences on the way you teach?
Like recently, or like
Yeah,
in
well,
the
probably
last like 20 years of coaching.
the last 20 years, because I think, well, I know I have, and most coaches, you
Mm.
slowly, as much as we probably say that we try and keep an open mind, you eventually slowly work towards probably something of a model, I suppose, and that's because you've
Yeah,
watched other coaches coach, and you sort of know, you have an idea of what you think works best for you, and things like that. So who do
sure.
you think has shaped that journey maybe the most for you?
Well, it's an interesting comment. I wouldn't say it would be the most of any one
Yeah.
sort of particular person at any one particular time. I think at certain times you kind of dive into certain ideas more than others.
Yep.
But I was encouraged really early on, and this was when I was probably still a trainee.
Yep.
So back in kind of the late 90s, I was 23, 24. But if I wanted to be the best coach, to try and learn from the best. I think
Mm.
it's pretty common statements.
Yep.
So the guy I was kind of working with back there, he used to work with Rick Smith out of the US, and he had kind of good contacts in the industry in the US. So back then there was no real internet. that I can remember. Maybe it was just starting. So a lot of the learnings were you had to go over there and actually spend time with the guys.
Yeah.
So my first kind of forays into learning coaching, at least face to face or hands on, would be going to the US. I was able to spend a month at the Rick Smith Golf School, spend time with Jim McLean instructors over there. Butch Harmon Academies, Ledbetter, we visited, a handful of times. That was probably in the first 4 to 5 years as a young coach. So for me, that was a good kind of starting point, because it was quite a mix of information, and all the coaching summits from 1988 US, European, Australian, all that stuff. Kind of dive into and read as much as possible. But but back then there was probably really just 3 or 4 guys over, who you'd probably look to, because they were the guys that were producing content,
Yes.
in the form of DVDs and VHS and things like that. And then, there was some Aussie coaches I certainly learned from, Steve Van Dale Lynch, David Milne, who are still great coaches today. But I was also very interested in, what was going on in the US and some of the different styles over there. And probably, I think the first coach that kind of popped out to me that was not, let's say, a household name, maybe even at the time, would have been Sean Foley.
Yeah.
Kind of popped up on the scene, and maybe that was a little bit more through internet. And I think it just, it kept going more in that direction.
Yeah. Great.
So I've tried to make it a point every year to do a minimum of 2 learnings.
Yep.
So that would be either traveling abroad, or a couple of years ago, I actually ran a coaching summit myself, which is pretty big. And we brought over Cameron McCormack. We brought over Jeff Ritter, who was great. And we brought over short game expert. I can't slip my mind right now. His name. And we were over short game expert from the US. So that was great. And so I've tried to do stuff like that every year. I've got a little bit more into the biomechanics and how the body works over the years. I guess you can't help but take information from Instagram and YouTube and some of the guys that are out there. But I think over time you learn to kind of filter information. Some of my more recent influence would be on Andreas, who I've spent a little bit of time with, both personally and online. Looked into a lot of this workings of kind of Andy Plummer and Stack and Tilt. I think they've got some very usable ideas, or ideas that have been used over the history of time, and certainly usable right now. And I think a lot of golf coaches use a lot of their ideas probably without even knowing it. But
absolutely,
so there's definitely kind of an evolution there. But one of the things that has stuck with me, and I'd say this is from day one, when I first went over to the US and spent time at the Rick Smith schools, their whole focus, with especially the beginner players, was around impact. How to create good impact.
Oh, we might have just dropped out for 2 seconds. Hold on.
The learnings are now, it's still basically around how to hit the ball solid, get distance, and how to control curve. So
great, fantastic. It's great. I mean, there is just so much information out there. I think the words you use, the filtering, is a good way to put it. And I spoke to Chris Ryan a couple of weeks ago, who's a big YouTuber and doing great things, and he said exactly that. I said, how do you teach? And he said, I don't really see myself as teaching one specific way. I see myself as a consumer of information, and then I filter it into my students in a really consumable way, which I thought was a really good way to look at it, sort of thing. So I also wanted to talk about a bunch of things, but we know you've got lots of lessons to do, so we'll try and make it relatively snap.
That's just on a, I would almost say, just a full swing technical evolution. I think there's a whole other side that we could discuss, which could be communication, short game, putting. There's obviously a whole bunch there we could dive into. A lot of people find that a little less exciting, but there's certainly a lot of what I've done over the years has also been around putting, short game, improving, communication and how I deliver, if you like. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, that's one thing I've noticed about your coaching. It's very holistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What I want to talk about as well is that you have made a really conscious effort to go to Asia and to really work that market. And I think that's, takes quite a lot of foresight and a bit of vision to do that and build it out. I just want your opinion on what do you think the golfing climate is in China at the moment? Because we've been hearing for 50 years that it's going to explode at some stage, and it probably hasn't for a number of different reasons. And then obviously the new frontier, which I think is just awesome, is you probably one of the first, Western coaches, I suppose you'd say, going to India and really doing some cool stuff in India. Do you want to sort of give us an idea of the climate?
China, I can't really comment on to the depth that you might be looking for, just because I haven't spent any time there. I mean, I've taught there a few times, but I haven't spent a lot of time on the ground as far as living. But it's certainly, I know when maybe a little bit of a boom maybe kicked in, maybe in the mid 2000s, there was a little bit of an issue over there with like golf course development and land and things like that. So I think some of the kind of quickness, if you like, of how it was going to develop slowed down a little bit because a lot of golf courses closed down.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. There was a lot of illegal developments that went on.
Yeah.
I think from a coach's standpoint, so I do know quite a few coaches that have been over there for a long time. Like their experience would be that, like a lot of Asian countries or expats moving to foreign countries, you have to stay in the country for a long time.
Yeah.
You have to, I think you really need to immerse yourself in the language, the culture. It's not a situation where you can go over there, think that you're going to do a smash and grab, perhaps, and be a success over there. I think anything that you're looking to build has to be over a sort of a long term. So the guys I know who are having the most success have been there the longest.
Yeah.
They have, they've really dived into the culture, the language, and and they build, long-term relationships with their clients.
Yeah.
And even other coaches there. So, and they tend to be having the most success. But there are challenges for sure because of what I mentioned, language, culture, visas, living in a foreign country. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And then talk about India. I think India's obviously, I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, India is an interesting country because just the sheer volume, of people over there. Obviously, cricket there is, just a complete, fascination with the country, and it's such an easy sport to get into. Golf, not so much. It's more the elitist over there, although there's a lot of effort to try and break it out a little bit more into challenging. But from my end, I was lucky enough to work with some students quite a few years ago who had some success. A young Indian girl came to me. She was 14. Who's now playing on the US tour.
Wow.
Aditi Ashok, and she was really a fantastic junior golfer who was already doing really good things over there. And she was lucky enough to walk across my lesson tee back about 5 years ago. And it was great to see her development. She's doing great. She was, she won Q school at the age of 17, represented India in the Olympics at 17 and created some waves there. And, I'd say to a large extent, she's really helped my profile in India. During that time, actually, even before I spent time with her, I actually did my first trip over to India and did a camp and kind of tasted a little bit what was over there. And every year I'd return there to do some program. I'd slowly built up some students that had come over to Malaysia, and then I started to do some trips over there just for one or two students. But that kind of escalated a little bit, and I guess over the years, just more and more students have got in contact with me. A lot of the early stuff was short game development, which then kind of spun into full swing and looking at their total game. So now I have quite a large student base there, and you kind of mentioned I go over there about 4 times a year now. I do probably trips of like 10 to 12 days, and I also have students that come over to Malaysia and sometimes other countries I teach from India. So yeah, that's been good. It's been building, and is again a mix of mostly it's elite juniors. I call them elite juniors. Juniors that are playing on that local tours over there, local amateur tour, and a handful of pros as well. So yeah, it's been fun.
And I imagine that probably India even more so than China, perhaps because of the history of Britain. There would be probably more people that speak English there as well, and probably make the whole process a lot easier.
Yeah, well, I'd even say that like English is the language that's spoken over there.
Yeah,
obviously, with the local language is Indian and a lot of other dialects, but everyone that I deal with speaks English very cleanly, and there's no issues there. So that certainly makes life a lot easier, and probably one of the reasons why I didn't dive into like a China or a Korea, because I'm a little lazy with languages, and Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, India are quite easy.
Oh, that's great. I think it's great.
But you know about that, so you spent time in Singapore.
Yes, absolutely. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So, all right. So just a couple more things. So I wanted to talk about the thing that I think you're absolutely incredible at, and I think that coaches need to get better at all the time. Like your social media constantly blows me away. Like the energy that you put into it. I would say that there might be people out there that post more things than you, but I don't think anyone puts more energy into what they post than you do, if that makes sense. So you post up to 6 times a day on Instagram, for example, and it's side-by-sides of comparisons. And I think the energy you put into it is, a second to none. It's incredible, and you've seen the growth out of that. So what would you recommend? Because I speak to coaches all the time that are always asking me, I just don't know what to post, or they're quite self-conscious. Like, what would you recommend to coaches out there who are trying to grow their social media from zero at the moment?
Well, the one thing you just mentioned was the self-conscious part.
Yeah.
And so one thing I decided to do, it was about 2 years ago. That's about when I started my Instagram, just over 2 years ago. I decided to not worry about what I was posting, or not, not put too much kind of self-conscious thought into what I was posting, and just kind of deal with what came back. And I think it's fair to say if you post some content, there's going to be some people that enjoy it, some people that don't. Some people will comment negatively, and I think that those comments shouldn't always be kind of just bypassed. I think they sometimes can help us to grow. There's obviously trolls out there as well. We don't get too much into worrying about them. If you get constructive feedback, I think that's actually a good thing, because that would help us to, or help me. It did sort of help me to go, okay, well, maybe I need to look at that a little bit more. Maybe I need to figure that out a little bit more. So not that you're sort of necessarily letting other people dictate kind of the pathway you're on, but I think if you decide to put content out, you have to just do it, and with little regard for not be too conscious about what's going to come back. Otherwise, you just kind of get stuck and you never put anything out.
Exactly.
So I heard this was said by someone a while ago. No piece of content's ever really going to bring you down. It's never going to be that bad. That it's just either it's going to be decent or quality, or it's going to be poor quality, and people are going to respond to that. They're either going to like your stuff, or they're not. It's either going to help you, or it's going to kind of leave you thereabouts. So, but I think if you just evolve and if you're good at what you do, and also you can make your content pop, I think that helps.
Yeah.
I think if you're not so good at what you do and the content looks good, eventually it's probably not going to wash. So then obviously guys have great content, and maybe it's not presented so well. I think eventually as well they're going to get the cred. So I maybe because of my background, I'm very kind of graphics and somewhat art driven. I like things to kind of look presentable, as well as have good quality about it. So maybe that's some of the stuff that comes through in Instagram.
Definitely. But it takes effort, doesn't it? You know what I mean? You've got to, not only do you have to come up with the concept and actually have the footage, and you've then got to put in the post-production and all that sort of stuff. So, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to do this, but how much time do you think you spend daily putting out all of the content?
Well, one thing on that first, I would say is I've over the last year and a half have really just gone by the Gary V motto, and is to document, not create. So I think it's tough when you've got to create something. Now, if you're someone that has a lot of time on your hands,
Yep.
which I don't, even though it might look like I do, I'm coaching 9 hours a day pretty much all the time. I try and take 1.5 days off.
Yep.
If I have to come up with a video every day out of thin air, I think that gets really tough. So a lot of the content, pretty much all the content that you see from me is within, I would say, a 3-day, working, coaching cycle of what I'm up to. I think that's where Instagram stories are really good. So, I'm just taking some content from the day, grabbing that and trying to chop it up and make it into some sort of usable, bit of information. But as far as oops. Sorry, mate.
But I think that's a great philosophy, isn't it? I think for anyone just wanting to get started, it's especially if you use a platform like Skillest or whatever to analyze people and document things. You've got the stuff right there, so you might as well just do and create content from what you're doing day to day.
Yeah, and as far as time, it could be 30 minutes. It could be two hours a day.
Yeah,
it could be anywhere from that sort of range. Early on, admittedly, I didn't have, I was probably using some of my previous content that I had, photos from, video, photo shoots that I've done for magazines. I've got an ebook series that I brought out, which had like 60 videos. So I chopped some of them up, on scoring and being competitive. So I think you can use different parts of content for sure. Doesn't all have to be what's happening, but I've just found lately, because of being time poor, it's hard to go out there and come up with, an original piece of content. So I just found that from my day-to-day stuff is what works. And I think at the end of the day, it's a little bit more real as well. Like it's just what's happening. So.
Well, absolutely. I think we might have just lost you for 2 seconds there. Okay, that's awesome. So, all right, we'll wrap it up just with a couple of things. So I asked this of all the coaches that we interview. We talk about what is the number one mistake, whether it be a philosophy, a concept, an attitude to practice, whatever it is, the average golfer makes when they try to improve themselves. What's the biggest mistake you think that everyone makes? And then sort of integrating what is something that someone can do tomorrow to start improving their game? So basically, what's the biggest mistake and what can they start focusing on tomorrow, whether it's a technical piece of advice or just a way to practice?
That's such a pretty open-ended question, that one, the one thing. I would say in the era that we're in now, it comes back to what I said earlier. I think filtering is like super important. I feel like golfers don't, we just go into one area of the game, swing, for example. I think golfers don't really understand the 2 or 3 key things that are holding them back. So when they go into, watching videos and whatnot, they will try things. And obviously a lot of these things don't really stick. So I really feel like if they just understood, again, the 2 or 3 things that were holding them back, maybe it's a contact issue, maybe it's got to do with how they're using their wrists or their body, and they had someone that could diagnose that and they could work on those things and just monitor those things, I think that they would have more chance to progress in a certain area of their game, whether that's putting, whether that's course management, whether that's full swing. That's the thing I think holds a lot of people back, and they're trying different things. Some of them that have got really good filters, I think can pick on that, but for the most part, they're kind of just throwing blindly at the dartboard, if you like.
Well, I always say people would come into me for golf lessons, and no matter who they are, they come in a conceptual Frankenstein, and basically. Right. And a lot of it is totally contradictory. Some of it works with other bits. Some of it was never supposed to be together, So,
totally,
the student's job is to find a coach, I suppose, that can clear all that sediment of rubbish away. You can just work on the core concepts that they need to work on that really relate to their pattern.
Sure. Yeah, I just like to break things down. I'll tell them like there's a couple of key things you need to impact. They might do that could tighten up their backswing. That's also going to help with contact, and then away you go. And just try and let them get comfortable with those few key things.
Awesome, Steve. I know you've got 8 hours ahead of you in 32-degree heat, so
yeah, cool.
I'll let you get to it. But mate, thanks so much for your time.
Good to catch up.
Yeah, we'll definitely connect again in the near future, and we might do some group chats as well, and we'll get some of the guys that you were talking about before, like Andreas, and we can get together and do a bit of a group chat as well. I think it'd be great.
Sounds good.
Oh, we just lost
Everyone.
you. Say that again. Say that one more time.
No, I just said thanks. That was cool. Have a good one. Good to catch up.
Thanks so much. I'll speak to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.